Leica, renowned for its precision engineering and optical excellence, contributes its expertise in lens design, while Panasonic handles the manufacturing and electronics, leveraging its advanced production capabilities. This synergy results in the Panasonic Leica DG series, a line of Micro Four Thirds lenses co-designed by Leica and produced by Panasonic under strict quality standards certified by Leica. In this video, I put all my past Panasonic reviews together with some refreshed sample images and commentary in between. Hope you enjoy. And what lens better encapsulates the prestige and quality of a Panasonic collection than the king of Micro Four Thirds lenses itself, introducing the 10-25mm f1.7. The Panasonic Leica 10-25mm f1.7 is without debate the king of Micro Four Thirds lenses. It is massive, gorgeous, well-designed, out-of-the-box innovative, and its optics quality is among the best of the best. Here's my review of my favorite lens of all time, Leica DG Vario Lumix 10-25 f1.7 lens. When I first heard of this lens, I was shocked by its unique zoom range and aperture, as well as the hefty price tag. Going from 10mm to 25mm, which translates into 20-50mm in full-frame terms, this lens taps into the realm of ultra-wide angle and at the same time allows you to zoom into standard 50mm field of view. It was unheard of before the release of Olympus 8-25mm f4 lens. And what distinguishes it from a typical ultra-wide lens is the f1.7 constant aperture, f1.7, simply remarkable. It is, to this day, still unmatched among all zoom lenses, with one exception being the legendary Sigma 18-35mm f1.8 lens. The wide angle allows you to create a variety of photography and videography. It can easily handle landscape, group shot, vlog, interior, etc. 20mm is quite significantly wider than 24mm. So far, I have never encountered a shooting situation with this lens where I wish I could zoom further out to, say, 18 or 16mm. 20mm hits a nice sweet spot for me. You can vlog with this lens. If you don't mind the weight and size, it is significantly larger than your typical Micro Four Thirds zoom lenses. Also much heavier. Though not as heavy as it looks, it is perhaps on par with or lighter than many premium full-frame zoom lenses. Since the barrel is quite large, vlogging with this lens might not look as wide as you would wish, because with a lightweight Micro Four Thirds zoom lens at a typical 12mm focal length, you can actually easily extend your arm all the way out to get a wider background. With this lens, it can be a little bit taxing on your arm muscles. The lens covers a lot of most popular prime focal lengths such as 12mm, 14mm, 18mm, and 25mm. Basically, this lens replaces a whole bunch of prime lenses. A trade-off must be decided. You either have to carry one heavy lens or a bunch of tiny prime lenses where you would have to swap lenses all the time. Depends on how you use your camera. Both options have their merits. When zoomed in to 25mm, it gives you a decent portrait focal length of 50mm full-frame equivalent. This is the standard field of view human eyes see. For me, it is a little bit short, to be honest. 70mm full frame would be much better. The extra range gives you the compression that even very bright aperture cannot compensate sometimes. On the other hand, 50mm might just be versatile enough. As mainly a video shooter, I can simply turn on the in-camera teleconverter in my GH5 to get a longer reach. The digital teleconverter on GH5 gives you 1.4 times crop, which turns the 50mm into exactly 70mm. Perfectly resolve the short reach issue. Granted, it doesn't equal the real physical focal length, but in a pinch, it is a lifesaver. When shooting 4K, you can hardly tell the difference between cropping or not. In 1080p mode, the image quality will suffer to a larger degree, but for video work, I would say it can totally pass as usable. By the way, you get 2.7 times crop in 1080p, which is quite an amazing reach of 135mm full-frame equivalent with this lens. So as a video shooter, I'm not worried about the focal range at all. But if you are a photographer, you might want to pick up a backup telephoto lens just in case. Now let's talk about the aperture. Constant f1.7 on a Micro Four Thirds lens. People say that it is only f3.4 full-frame equivalent. Well, they are perhaps half right. It is physically f1.7, it does not matter what system it is on. It is still crazy fast for a zoom lens and lets in a huge amount of light. The only downside is that it is for micro four thirds system. With 2x crop, the depth of field is also proportionally increased when you are looking at the same framing as full frame. Means you don't get the shallow depth of field as you get from f1.7 on full frame when you're shooting with the same framing. You get a depth of field of about f3.4 full frame equivalent. I'm completely happy with f1.7 aperture. It is on an equal footing with most of the prime lenses, with only a few that go as low as f1.4, f1.2, but realistically, f1.7 is probably the best sweet spot Panasonic can make. Imagine 10 to 25mm f1.4 lens, how much bigger the lens would have to be. Now, let's talk about the physical build, which is a part that I just love about this lens. It is gorgeous, it is a piece of artwork. I love the aperture range, smooth, stopless, gives you a seamless transition from one f-stop to another. Actually, you can get from f1.7 to 1.8 to 1.9, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, you get the idea. You can go between the most commonly used apertures and be really precise with the f number. Then there's the manual focus clutch. Oh boy, it is fun to use. I love it so much. I wish Panasonic put more manual focus clutch on their lenses like Olympus does. The joy of pulling the ring back and instantly engage in manual focus mode is just unmatched. The manual focus mechanism is still fly-by-wire without hard stop. There are soft stops on both ends where you will feel a stop. The gear can keep on turning indefinitely, but the focus ring itself stays at the stop. A lot of reviewers complain about it, but I personally don't find it an issue at all. The soft stop is very clear and unmistakable, not a problem for me at all. I find the manual focus very accurate, perfectly precise and very repeatable, as indicated with the distance marking on the lens. The manual focus is kind of a hidden selling point of this lens. I can't get enough of the manual focus utility. I don't know how to describe it. I just love using it so much. Also, it is parfocal, achieved electronically, works perfectly well for me. Autofocus is great. To be honest, the lens autofocus capability is only limited by the camera body itself. It is fast and silent on GH5, while in video it could hunt in certain situations, but that's completely on the contrast detect autofocus system, not the fault of the lens. And now something bad about the build quality actually. Perhaps the quality assurance could have been better by Panasonic, because apparently it is not uncommon to see the bottom barrel shell not glued on the lens properly, resulting the shell to be movable with slight force on it when you twist around the barrel, which is not only very annoying but also a hazard for weather sealing. I've seen Rhett Thompson's video warning of this issue. Go check out his channel and his videos. I thought it was quite rare that something like this could happen to such an expensive lens. Then it happened to me too when I first purchased it. I had to get it changed via retailer to get my current good copy. So yeah, it is kind of a turnoff when you spend so much money, 1,500 to 1,700 euro/dollar currently, supposedly premium product to be so poorly assembled. Image quality wise, I have seen a lot of reviews and tests online. There are only praises. It's pretty much optical perfection. Some test results indicate that it's sharper than most of the Panasonic Leica prime lenses. So I don't even know if it's worth testing the sharpness. I've tested it before, it's perfectly sharp. Corner to corner perfection. It's kind of the maximum you can get from a 20 megapixel micro four thirds sensor. The bokeh, as great subject separation when you get close to the subject. It has 0.28 meter or 0.92 feet minimum focusing distance. Pretty remarkable, though not as close as, for example, Panasonic Leica 12 to 60mm lens. This lens is my go-to lens for GH5. It stays on for about 80% of the time, I guess. It's fun to use, it's gorgeous to look at, the image quality is impeccable, the functionality is unmatched, and the features are unique. The biggest drawback, obviously, is going to be the price tag. If you can afford it, I'm sure you will absolutely love it. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribe to support my channel for more similar content. If you want to see a ton of sample footage shot with a GH5, like a 10 to 25mm, like a 12 to 16mm, look no further. I have plenty of them on this channel. Alright, thank you and see you next time. The Panasonic Leica 10-25 f1.7 is awesome, but sometimes cumbersome. I have to admit that I haven't used it nearly as much as the next lens that I'm gonna talk about. Next up is the most versatile standard zoom. If you can have one lens only, this should be it. Panasonic 12-60mm f2.8-4. I reviewed this lens twice. Despite having some technical issues in the first video, I'll still leave it in here for the sake of demonstrating more sample photos and to show my original viewpoint. After which is my recently updated remake of the 12-60 review, offering a fresh perspective and a lot more sample photographs. Panasonic Leica 12-60mm f2.8-4 lens is my favorite compact size all-around zoom lens. It's very capable lens function-wise with top-notch build quality and beautiful aesthetic design. Truly a treat to look at as well as to use. What more can you ask from a lens? The lens is made of metal, features a nice and smooth zoom ring, a thinner focus ring, an AF/MF toggle switch and image stabilization switch, with a plastic lens hood. Image quality-wise, I am thoroughly impressed by its sharpness at wide angle. Even at widest aperture f2.8, at 12mm, it is insanely sharp. In fact, probably the sharpest lens I've ever seen. However, my copy loses sharpness from 40mm to 60mm range at widest aperture. It captures much less detail and whole image just looks soft. You can solve it by stopping down the aperture and get a very sharp image still, as you can see in these sample images, but it really should be sharp wide open. I asked around on the internet as well as examined other reviews of this lens. I believe it's just my copy of the lens that has this issue, so if you are picking up a used copy like mine, be sure to check the tele-end sharpness before you buy. When talking about this lens, you have to talk about its exceptional zoom range. It is a full-frame equivalent to 24-120mm. Really impressive for a lens of such a tiny size. In fact, it weighs only 320 grams, fits perfectly on both GH5 and smaller cameras like GX85. At 12mm, you have a nice wide angle that allows you to take nice landscape photography and take pictures in tight environments such as urban streets. Also, it is very pleasant focal length for vlogging. At 60mm, you get really nice telephoto focal length to shoot your subject from a distance. It's extremely versatile. If you're traveling light, this is the lens to take with you. Speaking of the focal range, we have to talk about the bokeh and the f-stops because they are so closely related. At 12mm, the maximum aperture is f2.8. It drops as soon as you zoom in. At 50mm, it is f3.0, 18mm f3.2, 24mm f3.5. 32mm f3.8, 52mm f4.0. I'll list the f-stop with the focal length down in the comment section. So at 12mm f2.8, you actually get pretty nice bokeh for selfie. It's not impressive amount of background blur, especially if you come from full frame, but it is very pleasant looking. Generally, this lens cannot produce very shallow depth of field. It's not a bokeh lens. However, macro four thirds lenses usually have a very short minimum focusing distance. This one focuses at just 20cm at 12mm and 24cm at tail end of the range. That is crazy close to your subject. Oftentimes I have to take off the lens hood in order to get to the minimum focusing distance. Anyway, this short focusing distance allows you to really throw everything in the background out of focus easily. So when I say it's not a great bokeh lens, I meant it does not generate great bokeh in your standard distance shoot. But when you get up close to the subject, it is just wow. At 60mm f4, the compression really separates the subject from the rest of the scenery really well. It's simply gorgeous looking. In this set of example, the Leica 12-60mm at 60mm f4 creates a better looking bokeh than the Leica 10-25mm at 25mm f1.7. So yeah, you can shoot portrait with this lens, but unless you are close enough to your subject, you won't be getting much bokeh. But the mild background separation gives you a good sense of the surrounding, thus it's pretty nice for environmental portrait. That's the silver lining. Besides bokeh, I think the color also is wonderful. Panasonic GH5 already has a great color straight out of camera. Many times I just shoot natural profile with no grading and it looks just naturally beautiful. Now let's talk about the painful part, low light. It really does not shine much in low light situation. The most difficulty I've had is shooting people indoors at night. People move all the time, so it is difficult to slow the shutter speed to get cleaner images. So I always end up have to use high ISO and image just look lack of detail. Not a fan of it. But if you're shooting still subject, it's no issue. Also, if you shoot 4K video in low light, I think the image quality is totally passable. I would not hesitate to shoot casual 4K video with this lens, but for photos I'd pick something else with a brighter aperture. I have to compare it to the Lumix 12 to 60mm f3.5 to 5.6 kit lens because they're almost the same lens but actually quite different. The Leica version is parfocal. You can zoom in and out and focus remains the same, so it is very convenient for video making. Also, I do feel like the stabilization works better on the Leica than Lumix kit lens. At the beginning of a clip, Lumix lens usually generates an uncomfortable jitter, that is, the lens and camera trying to sync together to achieve dual IS. You can eliminate it by shooting video in movie mode, which enables dual IS full-time, so it doesn't do the jittering at the beginning of a clip. But on the Leica version, it just works a little bit better. Another issue is that the Lumix lens tends to hunt more in autofocus. So if I want to get nice landscape video clip, I usually use manual focus. Now with Leica lens, it's never been an issue. I just shoot in autofocus all the time. By the way, the manual focus ring is still fly-by-wire, which I don't like. The amount of focus travel varies, depends on how fast or slow you turn the focus ring, which make it very difficult to repeat the same focusing motion in video. In photo, it's totally fine. You can rotate it back and forth to get optimal focus very quickly, but I don't enjoy using it in video. The Leica 10 to 25mm f1.7 is much better in this regard. Now there's still an issue with the autofocus of this lens, or rather with the GH5 contrast detection focus system. I find that when you are shooting scenes with trees and skies in the background at the same time, when the focus shifts back and forth rapidly to confirm the focus, it creates a very unpleasant flashing in the tree branches that is very distracting and very ugly. So pay attention if you're shooting serious project, better just to use manual focus. In the end, let's talk about not the lens itself, but rather the price. It costs about 900 euros new. It is insane. It is. I mean, I love this lens, really. It's the best lens I've tried before getting the Leica 10 to 25mm f1.7. But the price tag is just not justified. If I get to decide, I would make the price for a brand new copy about 700 euro. That reflects the value much better. Still a premium product, but it is not ridiculously expensive considering the variable aperture. I bought it used for only 500 euros, so it came with the sharpness issue at telephoto end, but it's worth it still. I think 500 euros is a pretty nice price range for a used copy. It's kind of hard to find it below 500 at the moment. Alright, here's my conclusion. A list of pros and cons for you to decide whether or not it's a good buy for you. Pros: 1. Great zoom range, extremely versatile. 2. Exceptional build quality and aesthetic design. 3. Great close focusing capability, almost macro capability, which creates beautiful bokeh. 4. Decent level of bokeh for Micro Four Thirds standard. 5. Parfocal. 6. The switches on the lens offer great control during a shoot, very practical and functional. 7. Sharp, crazy sharp, except that in my case, it is soft at telephoto range. Pretty sure it's just my individual case though. 8. Compact size, discreet, lightweight, matches the GX85 very well. And the cons: 1. Variable aperture f2.8 to f4. At f4, it is a little bit uninspiring. 2. The lack of bokeh if you are a bit far from the subject, aka standard shooting distance. 3. Fly-by-wire manual focus system is not quite that great experience for video. 4. Too expensive for what it offers. 5. Struggles in low light situations, depending on what you shoot. So that is my full review of this lens. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more camera and lens reviews, please subscribe. In August 2021, I made my Panasonic Leica 12-60mm f2.8-4 lens full review. It's been 3 years since, and I just wanted to make an update to this review, adding some sample photos and videos, updating some information. Thought it'd be easy and quick, but I turned out to be wrong. After watching the original review, I realized that most parts of the video need to be changed or improved, so I decided to just make it from scratch. I went through 4 years archive to find 3,000 pictures taken with the Leica 12-60 and trimmed it down to what we got now in this video, about 500 pictures, plus some nice video footage. The performance of the original review did not reach my expectation. It's been over 3 years and it still only got 9,000 views, vastly underperforming my other similar caliber videos like Panasonic 10-25, 15mm, or LX100 II reviews. Well, it's time to change that and make a banger review out of it. A lot has changed in 3 years, including my thoughts and opinions and my impressions of this lens. There's been ups and downs, moments where I thought this lens was the most precious thing in the world, and moments where I thought it was useless. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's get on with my updated review of the Panasonic 12-60mm f2.8-f4 lens, and I hope you enjoy the images I selected. First, build quality. Like all the other Panasonic Leica lenses, this one has a full metal construction, which means it's very solid, durable. It's definitely built to last. In my opinion, this lens has the perfect size as a standard zoom lens for Micro Four Third Pro camera bodies. It is relatively compact and lightweight, not too big and not too small. Significantly smaller and lighter than its full-frame counterparts like a typical 24-70 or 24-105 lens. The Leica 12-60 feels just right in your hand. Not only that, it manages to present itself very well as a professional-grade lens. It has a premium build and look, and you'll never look at this lens and go, such a small lens, it can't be any good. It breaks the prejudice by being such a well-built and well-crafted lens and at the same time, so compact. Obviously, it is not the only lens in its category that manages to achieve such great first impression. The Panasonic Lumix 12-35 f2.8 and Olympus 12-40mm f2.8 both are in the same position and handle the balance between size and performance perfectly. I love the minimalist, streamlined silhouette of this lens. Nothing looks redundant and nothing can be removed. The matte black paint lays a perfect foundation for this series of lenses to give it a cool, sleek, sharp first impression. Then the Leica type font in white engraving is subtle but emanates elegance. The orange 12-60 marking grabs your immediate attention and informs you what this lens is about. And last but not least, the cherry on top, the typical Leica red dot. Everything put together, you get the unmistakably refined Leica look on this lens. Obviously, the same can be said for all Panasonic Leica lenses, and there are quite a few out there, such as the 50-200 f2.8-4, 8-18mm f2.8-4, 12mm f1.4, 15 f1.7, etc. What makes this lens special is its versatile zoom range in conjunction with its compact size makes it a perfect travel and multi-purpose lens, the best all-rounder in Panasonic Micro Four Third lineup. This lens was my introduction to Panasonic Leica lenses, and it was something inexplicably special to me. Was it magic? Was it the brand image? Was it the beautiful styling of the lens? Or the image quality? What captivated me was the urge it evoked in me to go out and shoot. During my honeymoon period with this lens, every picture I shot with this lens was casted under a halo effect. It just looked different. In what way? I had no idea. That was my own excitement as a photographer crossing paths with a passion bestowed into this lens by its designers and engineers. The two positive energy fields resonate with each other, and that was what made it special. No honeymoon period lasts forever, so let us not linger on the emotional aspect any longer. Time to dive into the technicalities, the meat and potatoes of this lens, its features, performance, advantages, and weaknesses. First of all, image quality. This lens is absolutely sharp. From wide open f2.8 at 12mm, it is sharp. For things like landscape and street photography, I usually stop it down to f5.6 to get more depth of field, and of course the images get even sharper. Such high quality performance persists even at tele end of the zoom range, at 50-60mm wide open the lens still delivers excellent sharpness across the frame. In my previous review, I claimed that the lens gets soft when shooting wide-open aperture f4 at 60mm. I was quite disappointed by the fact that at 60mm f5.6, it looked quite a bit better than f4. This time I did some side-by-side comparison again, shooting at f4 and f5.6. The shots taken at f4 indeed exhibits less contrast straight out of camera. It has slightly softer look compared to f5.6 shot, if you look very closely. But it is not nearly as bad as I thought. Simply adding a touch of sharpness and texture in Lightroom, the two pictures will be practically indistinguishable from each other. Back when I came to my conclusion for the first review, I used a terrible editing software that blurrified every picture it processes. It was not until 2023 that I discovered the root of the problem lies in the software, not my cameras or lenses. By then, thousands of my pictures have already been ruined by it, and I promptly made a whole video ranting about that software and showcasing how it destroys image quality by comparing its results side by side to Lightroom edits. That terrible software processing exacerbated the difference between f4 and 5.6 and made me think that f4 was terrible, but in reality is pretty good for tele end of a compact long zoom lens. As I said, for a landscape or a street or anything that requires critical sharpness, I'd shoot stopping down to f5.6 anyway. Sharpness is always guaranteed. The occasion where I shoot at f4 wide open is for some casual portrait or trying to get shallow depth of field. For example, the bird in this shot was taken at f4, yet it is extremely sharp after some simple post-processing. So yeah, I don't think this lens has a sharpness issue. When talking about this lens, you have to talk about its exceptional zoom range. It is full frame equivalent 24 to 120mm. Really impressive for a lens of such a tiny size. In fact, it weighs only 320 grams, fits perfectly on both pro bodies like GH5, GH6, GH7, G9, G9 Mark II, as well as on smaller bodies like GX85, GX8, GX9. At 12mm, you have a nice wide angle that allows you to take nice landscape photography and take pictures in tight environments such as urban streets. Also, it is very pleasant focal length for vlogging. In fact, I'm a huge fan of using versatile standard zoom lens for vlogging instead of ultra-wide lenses, because you can zoom in so much to emphasize on the subject or pick out interesting things from afar whenever you want. It's something you'll simply miss out with the ultra-wide zoom lenses. In vlogging shots, 12mm focal length gives you just enough space for a talking head and nice blurred background at f2.8. I'm all for it. At 60mm, you get a really nice telephoto focal length to shoot your subject from a distance. In combination with some of the cropping features in Lumix cameras, such as shooting video in pixel-to-pixel mode, the 60mm can extend to 120mm and beyond. It's extremely versatile if you're traveling light. This is the one lens to take with you, and you can forget about switching lenses. The incredible range without costing the image quality is what primarily differs this lens from similar standard zoom lenses like Lumix Leica 12-35 f2.8. If you prefer to have more range, one-stop aperture sacrifice is totally worth it. Speaking of the focal range, we have to talk about the bokeh and the f-stops, aka the aperture, because they're so closely related as a variable aperture zoom lens. At 12mm, the maximum aperture is f2.8, and it drops as soon as you zoom in. At 15mm, it is f3.0. At 18mm, it is f3.2. 24mm, f3.5. 32mm, f3.8. 52mm, f4.0. So at 12mm f2.8, you actually get pretty nice bokeh for a close-up shot. In standard shooting situations, this lens cannot give you impressive amount of background blur, especially if you come from full frame and are used to that full frame look. But it is a very pleasant looking amount of subject separation. It is not a bokeh master by any means. However, Micro Four Thirds lenses usually have a very short minimum focusing distance. This one focuses at just 20cm at 12mm and 24cm distance at the tele end of the range. That is crazy close to the subject. Oftentimes I have to take off the lens hood in order to get to the minimum focusing distance. Anyways, this short focusing distance allows you to really throw everything in the background out of focus easily. So when I say it is not a great bokeh lens, I mean It does not generate great bokeh in your standard distance shooting. But when you get up close to the subject, it is a whole different story. It gets better bokeh than the Olympus 40-150 f2.8 or Leica 10-25mm f1.7, simply by shooting super up close at 60mm f4. The compression really separates the subject from the rest of the scenery better than those supposed bokeh master lenses, thanks to its exceptional close focusing distance. So overall, due to its humble f4 aperture at long end, this lens doesn't particularly shine in portrait shooting, nor in sports, because it simply doesn't separate subject from environment enough from a long distance. Thanks to the close focusing distance, it can be a great product shot lens. The bokeh, although nothing extraordinary, is very pleasant to the eyes, and whenever I shoot B-roll of my gear, I often first pick up this Leica 12-60mm over any other lenses. In low light, this lens is decent, thanks to Lumix camera's exceptional IBIS, in-body image stabilization. I've never hesitated to shoot in low light situation. f4 is rather constraining, but one rarely needs to shoot long focal length in the dark anyway. On the side of the lens, there is AF-MF switch for camera bodies that don't feature a focus mode dial. In autofocus, this lens performs great. I have no complaint. And for the most part, the autofocus of Panasonic cameras have been held back by contrast detect autofocus system, not by their native premium lenses. It guarantees the best autofocus experience the camera body can achieve. And with phase detect autofocus on G9 Mark II and GH7, I have total confidence in this lens performance. Manual focus ring is smooth. In newer Lumix camera bodies, there is linear focus settings that you can choose. The focus travel will depend on the focus ring's travel distance, not on how fast you turn the focus ring. So you get much more accurate and more repeatable manual focus. On top of that, you can also customize the rotation angle for your focus ring. If you want quick and swift focus, you can set it at 90 degrees. If you want extremely precise focus, you can set it to up to 1080 degrees. You have total control over the manual focus ring behavior. Excellent built-in feature by Panasonic. Speaking of focusing, this lens is also parfocal, means once you focus on one particular subject, you can zoom in or out, and the focus will always remain on the subject you focused on. Same is true for other Panasonic Leica lenses like the 10-25mm f1.7, 8-18mm f2.8 to f4. It's a great feature for video makers. The best way to see this effect is to use manual focus, focusing on one subject and zoom in and out and see for yourself. This lens comes with optical image stabilization, works in conjunction with the IBIS in camera. Very powerful tool to stabilize your shots, very handy in both photo and video shooting. In video, if you are not shooting in video mode, for example, if you're in aperture priority mode, then the IBIS and OIS are not readily engaged with each other initially until you hit recording button, and you will see some jittering at the very beginning of the footage. That's the two systems trying to sync up. If you don't want this to happen in your footage, just put mode dial on video and both systems will be always engaged before you even hit recording button, so that you won't see any initial jittering. Today this lens comes in brand new for about 900 euros. Still a little bit high, I would say. I said before that this lens is fantastic but slightly overpriced. I think 799 euro brand new would be a more reasonable price for a lens of its age. Luckily, it's not hard to find good copies of it on the second-hand market, which goes for about 500 euros right now. At this price, it's practically the exact same as Lumix 12-35 f2.8 or Leica 12-35 f2.8 if brand new. The question is, which one should you pick? The key differences between these two models are focal range, aperture, and build. Personally, I prefer the Leica 12-60 for the longer range, the full metal build. It loses light pretty quickly as you zoom in, but if you compare f2.8 to f4 on Micro Four Thirds, honestly, the difference in bokeh at 35mm is very marginal. Especially if you zoom to 60mm f4, it actually produces better bokeh. Though I have my personal preference, I cannot recommend either one over another, for they are both fantastic. And it's all up to you, and I'm sure you can't go wrong either way. Once I acquired the legendary Leica 10-25mm f1.7 lens, this 12-60 took a backseat for quite a long time. Both cover a very practical focal range, but I used 10 to 25mm f1.7 whenever I could instead of 12 to 60 for the tremendous aperture advantage, and the 10mm ultra-wide angle is something else. I fell for the fear of missing out, and like a 12 to 60, my original treasure became inferior in my mind for quite a while. I felt guilty to neglect my precious 12 to 60, but eventually the 12 to 60 came around and becomes my go-to lens once again, thanks to its compactness. It's a lens that I imagined that I'd pick up in a chaotic situation, say zombie apocalypse is coming, and it's everyone for himself. I'd be much better off with a lightweight carry lens that sees farther than naked eyes than a big chunky premium lens. Though very impossible the scenario, it highlights the importance of the very first principle of Micro Four Thirds system, being compact and competent at the same time. And 12 to 60mm f2.8 to 4 is a perfect embodiment of this philosophy, of the Micro Four Thirds spirit. To sum it up, this lens is great for macro shot, product shot, street photography, landscape, vlogging, documentary shot, and a bit of everything. In a pinch, it can shoot sports and animals. It's essential. It's a must-have. It's the backbone and pillar of the Panasonic Lumix lens selection, and perhaps my favorite lens of all time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to support the channel. Any purchase through the Amazon affiliate link below is much appreciated. It helps the channel a lot. I'll see you soon with another lens or camera review. Now let's go back to wide-angle perspective with a top-notch optical quality and a beautiful design. The Panasonic 8 to 18mm f2.8 to 4 definitely captured my heart and has become one of my most frequently used lenses, especially in video production. The Panasonic Leica 8 to 18mm f2.8 to 4 lens carries the aesthetic lineage of Leica design, with the clean lines and a minimal branding that speaks to professional subtlety. The light orange lettering and tiny red dots are the cherry on top of the matte finish, gives it a marvelously elegant look, perfectly in line with all the Panasonic/Leica aesthetic style. Attractiveness is 10 out of 10. The geometry of the barrel expands towards the outer end, encapsulating the idea of a wide-angle lens that is supposed to open up to grab more view to fit into the frame. It's beautiful, functional, and philosophically fitting for an ultra-wide lens. Alright, I just spent a whole paragraph describing the look. It's because this is the most beautiful lens design in all Micro Four Thirds zoom lens lineup in my eyes. In case you couldn't tell, I'm really in love with the shape of this particular lens. At this moment, I'm talking about the lens not from a photographer's point of view, but a collector's point of view. The existence of the Leica 8 to 18mm lens makes the whole Panasonic lineup more dynamic, spirited, outgoing, and complete. The 10 to 25mm f1.7 is also a top-tier, gorgeous lens, but the 8 to 18 beats it in its simplicity and compactness. Its sister lens 12 to 60mm f2.8 to 4 deserves nearly the same praise, but the barrel design of the 8 to 18 just makes it stand out so much more. Enough of the aesthetics. Let's circle back to being a photographer and a videographer and talk about the functionality of the lens. 8 to 18 provides a very typical ultra-wide zoom focal range. In full frame terms, it's 16 to 36mm. Right off the bat, the ultra-wide angle makes your work a lot more exciting and visually impactful. At the long end, 18mm focal length also provides a perfectly standard field of view for a lot of street photographers, so it is also very practical and versatile in day-to-day usage, unlike lenses that stops at 28mm full frame equivalent focal length, which can feel a little bit too restricted. The excitement brought by the ultra-wide look could wear off sometimes. Sometimes I felt like there's not much I could shoot with ultra-wide lens because everything fits in the frame and it's hard to capture unique images in the same location over and over like standard lens could. But eventually I always come back to the 8 to 18 lens, especially when I'm vlogging and documenting everyday life. The 8 to 18 is a simple but effective weapon to capture the moment. It's hard to take the lens off my camera. This lens is internal zoom, but you do see the lens elements trombone in and out while zooming within the outer shell. On the side, it has AF/MF switch, convenient for many cameras that don't have focus mode switch on camera. Zoom ring is metal, rotates very smoothly. The 90-degree rotation is perfectly comfortable for its focal range. The focus ring is further out, on the elevated surface of the barrel, makes it easy to distinguish from the zoom ring and feels very unique. The engraved branding between zoom ring and focus ring rests nicely on the slope. Beautiful. This lens has nearly identical size and weight as Leica 12-60mm f2.8-4, means it's got a compactness advantage for daily carry, yet still delivers stellar image quality. The f2.8-4 variable aperture might be a turnoff for some people, but at this point I just accepted that Panasonic loves f2.8-f4 design, and it's got its own charm. I don't mind it, especially when you know that it's sharp wide open. At first, I thought this lens was a little bit soft, so I did a side-by-side pixel peeping test against the Leica 10-25 f1.7 lens, the king of micro four thirds zoom lens image quality. The result was surprisingly even. The 8-18 is basically on par with the 10-25 in most situations, barring the 18mm. I'll talk about it in a moment. Although the 10-25mm lens also handles chromatic aberration and contrast better. If we are just talking about the sharpness, turns out that I was pixel peeping this lens so hard that it made me think it was soft. I was zooming in 300%, 500%, way beyond what was reasonable to expect from an ultra-wide lens. When you shoot the same subject with ultra-wide lens versus a standard lens, of course, the standard lens will give you much more detail, and that's the amount of detail I had in mind when I was looking at the wide-angle lens. I forgot about that. The point is, this lens is very sharp wide open at f2.8. Stopping down to f4 or 5.6 helps you achieve better corner-to-corner sharpness due to depth of field. So what's up with the 18mm? I find my lens a little bit soft in the bottom left at 18mm, which doesn't seem to be very typical according to other online reviews. Some people report that it's sharp throughout the range. Maybe the corner gets a little bit softer? I guess I'm once again a victim of the slightly worse copy of an amazing lens. It happens, but fret not. I bought it for a wide-angle focal length, not 18mm focal length. Here I'm throwing in a comparison between the 8-18mm on the G9 versus the Lumix 14-28mm on S1R, just for fun, to appreciate the extra detail given by the 47-megapixel full-frame sensor. The aperture f2.8-4, as I said before, I find it adequate for my use. The only gripe I have with it is that you won't find much bokeh with this lens, being an ultra-wide angle lens, unless you get really close to the subject, which you can do, because it does have an impressively close minimum focusing distance of 23 cm. You can certainly get some interesting perspective by shooting up close with ultra-wide lens. With newer Panasonic cameras, you can select linear manual focus in camera for this lens and set the rotating degrees to your liking. Very convenient for filmmakers that require precise focus pulling. Also, it is just superior user experience. The zoom is parfocal like its sister lens, the Leica 12-60 and 10-25. You can focus on anything and zoom in and out, and it won't require refocusing. Once again, a great tool for video makers. It is a highly practical and sexy lens that goes perfectly together with other Panasonic lenses like the 12-60, 50-200. But what about the Leica 10-25 f1.7? Their focal ranges largely overlap each other. It all comes down to a few trade-offs. The advantage of the 8-18 is being compact and wider, and the 10-25mm f1.7 is supreme in its bright constant aperture and goes up to 25mm. In my experience, there are times where I find it difficult to decide which one to use, but it mostly comes down to the compactness and aperture brightness. If I were to travel, I would bring 8-18mm. If I were to shoot low light or need shallow depth of field, I would go with 10-25. But in the end, I find myself using the compact 8-18mm much more often. Nothing diminishes the greatness of the 10-25mm lens, but the 8-18 just makes the choice so easy by being so good looking, super wide, and compact. You pick it up and go. The readiness of this lens makes it an easy choice. To be honest, if I didn't have the 10-25mm f1.7, I'd still be perfectly happy shooting with the f2.8-4 zoom lenses plus the Leica 15mm f1.7. And if I had only the 10-25mm f1.7, which could theoretically replace a whole bunch of lenses like the Leica 8-18, 12-35, or any amount of fast prime lens in between 10-25 range, I'd still feel missing out on the compactness. That says a lot about the philosophy of lens choice. An all-in-one, all-powerful lens that beats all the other lenses isn't always necessarily the best lens for the occasion. There definitely is a strong case for the utility of a smaller, more compact lens, even if it means you have to swap lens from time to time. It's the shooting experience while the lens is on the camera that counts, more than the experience of having to swap lens on the trip. To sum it up, it's well-designed, beautiful crafted, highly practical and compact ultra-wide zoom lens. Gives all the premium features and feels without breaking a bank today. At the price of $500, $600 on the second-hand market today, amazing value for money. And if you vlog to document your daily life or shoot wide-angle landscape or any project that requires ultra-wide-angle view, this lens will stay on your camera 90% of the time. I love this lens. 10 out of 10, highly recommended. Enough zoom lenses, let's take a look at the primes. And perhaps this is the most popular walk-around prime lens from Panasonic lineup. The classic, timeless Panasonic 15mm f1.7. I like it so much that I reviewed it twice. Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 lens is a gorgeous looking little lens with a manual aperture ring and unique lens hood design. It is the one lens out of all Panasonic Leica Micro Four Thirds lens collections that most resembles a classic Leica M mount lens design. The compact, simple and elegant aesthetics is calling on you to pick it up and shoot with this lens. That's the brilliant part of a lens design on the outside. A handsome lens will naturally get picked up more and in turn gives you more opportunity to shoot than you would otherwise. The size of this lens is small, but I didn't expect it to be this small because looking at the product picture on Amazon doesn't really give you a sense of dimension. It is almost a pancake lens size, weighing only 115 grams. It sits comfortably on my GX80. In fact, this combo strikes a perfect balance and they fulfill each other's purpose brilliantly. In my opinion, it's the perfect size for rangefinder style camera body. In fact, it looks quite similar to the lens on the point-and-shoot LX100 series cameras. However, on a bigger camera like the Lumix G9 or GH5, this lens looks a little bit too small to my liking, and it feels like something's missing when I'm using it on G9 or GH5. The lens barrel is made of metal, including the lens hood. Solid build quality as all the products from Panasonic Leica collaboration. Beautiful engraving in Leica font is almost half the selling point of the lens. Flashy, but in a subtle way. The lens shade has a peculiar shape tapered towards the front end, exact opposite direction from most other lens hoods. I found the shape odd at first, but later warmed up to it, and it does add a little bit of fun uniqueness to its look. By the way, the lens hood is a little bit too loosely fitted on the lens, extremely easy to bump and loosen accidentally. Taking the lens hood off, it's still a very handsome lens, if not even more so. Despite the exceptional build quality, it does not offer weather sealing. On the side of the lens, there's an AF/MF switch, a very handy feature. Gotta appreciate Panasonic for putting it on such a tiny lens. The focus ring is smooth with low resistance. It's going to be difficult to find focus with fly-by-wire manual focus system. Luckily, the later model of Lumix cameras offer linear focus function that allows it to mimic a mechanical manual focus, making manual focusing much more intuitive. Aperture ring, a big selling point for this lens, is beautifully crafted. It has very mild but distinct clicks between each fraction of f-stops. I like how they put the A auto mode next to the maximum aperture f1.7, unlike some other manufacturers put it next to the highest f-stop, so that when I go from any aperture value to auto aperture control, I always start from f1.7. This way, when you go from high f-stop like 5.6 down to f1.7, even if you overshoot f1.7 and get to auto mode, you still get f1.7. So it's really fail-safe and convenient for anyone who needs to constantly switch between different f-stops and f1.7. The downside is that the aperture ring is actually very loose once again. Everything is just a little bit too loose on this lens. The aperture ring doesn't inspire much confidence when you are out and walking around. Very easy for your fingers to slip and slide it by accident. I wish they made it a little bit more stiff. 15mm is rather unique. It is full frame equivalent of 30mm, sitting right between two of the most popular focal lengths, 28mm and 35mm. I haven't seen any 30mm full frame equivalent prime lenses. until doing research for this review. The only other lens I found is the Sony 20mm f2.8 for APS-C sensor coverage. I can't help but wonder, what does it mean? Why did they choose 15mm? Why not 17mm? Panasonic has a 14mm lens, a 20mm lens, but never a 17mm lens. Yes, Olympus has a couple of 17mm lenses, but I don't think that's the reason for Lumix to avoid 17mm. Honestly, I don't know, but it's nice that they're trying something new and different. 15 is actually pretty wide, which allows you to capture more landscape or day-to-day documentary style photographs, with just a touch tighter framing to bring out the subject in focus a little bit more. So yeah, you can't get much bokeh straight away. You need to get up close with this lens, get intimate with the subject you are shooting, thus create an image that builds closer relationship between audience and subject, especially in portraits. The angle of view of this 15mm lens sits right between 10mm and 25mm. Maybe it's all planned ahead by Panasonic because you can regard this lens as a mini version of the monster lens 10 to 25 f1.7. When you don't want to or cannot bring out the heavy 10 to 25, use this on GX80. On a trip, in crowded space, in precarious environment, you will feel much safer, lighter, more agile, and right at home with this tiny lens. And with a bit of work on your feet, it does a good job replacing 10 to 25 f1.7 in a pinch. Speaking of focal length, I think it's brilliant for environmental portrait or just casual portrait when you are going out with friends. Snap a picture or two absent-mindedly every now and then, and you will be surprised when you get home and check the result and see how fun these pictures turn out. As a wide-angle lens, it still barely works for vlogging purpose, given that you don't mind a little tighter framing. You do get more compression and background blur than typical vlogging lenses like 12mm and beyond, so if that's what you're looking for, it's perfect. There is a soft spot in the left region in images taken by this lens, in some situations I think, which could be an issue of this particular copy that I bought used. I haven't heard anything negative about the optical quality, so I can only assume it's just my lens or user error. The soft spot is kind of hard to find unless you pixel peep, which I do daily. Otherwise, it is very sharp lens across the frame, starting from f1.7 already. I always stop down to f4 to ensure the sharpness across frame in landscape because of the depth of field, but otherwise I never hesitate to shoot at a wide open f1.7. Slight magenta chromatic aberration can be found when having winter tree branches in overcast sky. Haven't really noticed it in other situations, so I'd say that it's generally very well controlled. When shooting against sunlight, sometimes there's purple flaring. It is rather distracting and should be avoided. Even with the lens hood, it doesn't help much. Autofocus is pretty quick in stills, especially when there's sufficient lighting. I've never had a problem with autofocus when shooting outdoors. I always had this impression that this lens sucks in video autofocus. But in today's test, I think it did really well on the GH6, still a contrast-based autofocus system. And if I get out of the frame, focus on the background and come back. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Get out of the frame. And back into the frame. Seems to be doing okay. Now I think about it, it might be because I always use the lens on the GX80, which has a pretty slow autofocus comparing to the G9 or GH6 in video, which led to my initial impression. That being said, the Leica 12 to 60mm is still much faster and more responsive in my video autofocus testing. (12 to 60mm at 15mm). This one is so much snappier. Instant lock on. Maybe because the maximum aperture at this focal length is only f3, but it does so much better. Again, 12 to 60. Grab onto the focus very nicely. Doesn't really lose the focus here. Very responsive. That's good stuff. Yeah, that's very quick. In real life use case, whenever I need to shoot something more serious, I will bring the Leica 10 to 25 f1.7 lens. It covers wide angle to standard field of view as well as low light. In this case, I will never bring the Leica 15mm f1.7 on the second camera because the focal length as well as the aperture perfectly overlap. It makes no sense to bring another lens that does the same thing. So Leica 10 to 25mm with Leica 15 is a no-go combination for me. As I mentioned before, the Leica 15mm comes in handy when you don't feel necessary or comfortable bringing the 10 to 25 lens. What about Leica 12 to 60mm f2.8 to 4 lens in combination with the Leica 15? This way you get a wide focal range coverage, and the f1.7 aperture is going to guarantee you some nice low light and or bokeh shots. Ideally, you want even another prime lens that's maybe 25mm or even longer. But if you have longer prime lenses, maybe you could ditch zoom lens altogether. Imagine having 15mm f1.7 on one camera and a 25 or 42.5mm lens on another. Should cover most situations for prime shooters. What about Leica 8 to 18mm f2.8 to 4 lens in combination with the Leica 15? Actually, since they both emphasize on wide angle, I would rather go for a tighter prime to complement the 8 to 18. So this is perhaps not a combo I would use. As a zoom lens person, I still do not want to relinquish the control over focal length I have using zoom lenses. But this Leica 15mm f1.7 is really fun and adorable. It is handy lens for quick snapshots of moments in life in close range, thanks to the lovely bokeh and wide angle, small build, and its unintrusiveness. So is this lens for you? If you love shooting prime and wide angle street photography, this might just be perfect for you. Or even just use it as a casual B camera lens, permanently living on a small camera body like Lumix GX series. Bring it anywhere you go. I think it's brilliant for that. Overall, a brilliant lens that doesn't outshine its bigger brothers and sisters, the Leica 12mm f1.4, 42.5mm f1.2, or the Leica 10 to 25mm f1.7, but it is technically sufficient and photographically fun as it is. Thank you for watching. Hello, and today I want to talk about the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 lens once again. I got this lens for the first time 2 years ago or something, I don't remember. I made a full review on this channel, you can check it out. I'm gonna put a link down below somewhere. And I really liked this lens. The only reason that I sold it was because it was idling. I wasn't using it because I was a zoom lens shooter. I basically only shot with the zoom lenses. It just didn't make much sense for me as a zoom lens shooter to have a 15mm lens that is already covered by multiple other zoom lenses that I already own in terms of focal length. So I sold it, but now I bought it back. It's because I recently just discovered the fun of shooting with prime lenses. For example, recently I went on a trip to Rome and I brought with me only the Lumix S1R and Lumix 35mm f1.8. So it's one single lens on one trip. It was a little bit a challenge for myself, but I felt very comfortable shooting with a single lens on that trip. I didn't feel like I was missing out. So I grew more confident in shooting with only prime, and I found the joy, I found the fun in shooting with the prime. So here we are. I bought it back, and it is one of the best prime lenses that you can get for Micro Four Thirds system. It's good looking and it performs really well, and it's small and compact, and it's not super expensive. It's a little bit expensive. The lens is beautiful, matches very well with all the small cameras like my GX800. It's a very gorgeous looking lens. It's the performance, the lens is very sharp from wide open f1.7. The edges might be a little bit soft. I shoot f5.6 most of the time anyways, so it doesn't really bother me. It's more like a street photography lens that I shoot with higher aperture number, higher f number, so I can get everything in focus. There's no soft spot that I discovered like last time. In my full review, I found a soft spot, but this time I didn't see it in my pixel peeping. If I see it again, I'm gonna let you know in the comments. The autofocus motor can keep up pretty well with the modern cameras like the G9 Mark II. It's probably not as fast as some of the more modern lenses, the more updated lenses. But there's no need for it to be super fast because no one is gonna use 15mm lens to shoot wildlife or sports. The aperture ring is the most delightful thing on this lens. It's beautifully designed. As I said last time, it's a little bit loose. I wish it was a little bit tighter to turn, but it is what it is. But it's gorgeous looking and beautiful and very functional. I shoot aperture priority all the time, so having the aperture ring on it means I don't have to fumble the dials and the stuff on the camera. I can just turn the aperture ring, and it's very intuitive and it's very visual. You can see it without looking at the screen. You can just see it physically where you are at. It's very, very convenient. I enjoy the shooting process very much with the aperture ring. And recently I went back to China. This time I did another challenge. I brought only the GX800 and this Leica 15mm. Very tiny compact combination. So I was afraid that I would feel missing out because, you know, when go on a big trip like this, going for 2 weeks or 10 days trip, you want to use the best gear to capture the best image, best footage, best of everything. But this time I just chose to be compact and lightweight, and it was so fun. And it doesn't burden you, it doesn't weigh you down wherever you go, so you always carry it with you. It's so liberating. I just cannot express how much I enjoyed this combination on the trip. I think it's brilliant. Plus the color I painted on my camera, it's a custom spray paint red. It's coming off a little bit on the right hand side because my fingers scratching it a little bit, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I love the look of this combination. I think they are born for each other. Beautifully designed aesthetically. I'm gonna do a review of these GX800 someday as well, soon I guess. I've shot quite a lot of photos on this camera already, so I think it's time to do a review. Not yet, someday when I have the inspiration. Anyways, I don't think I would have taken better pictures even if I had brought a zoom lens with me on this trip to China. So I think simplicity is really fun and you must try it. People who shoot zoom lenses only, I want to convince you to challenge yourself to go on a trip and bring only one prime lens, and you will find the joy of shooting a prime lens. I'm sure it's going to be a interesting experience. Last but not least, the wild card, Panasonic LX100 II, point and shoot camera featuring a Micro Four Thirds sensor. It doesn't carry the Leica name on the camera body, but it does have it on the lens. It is essentially the same camera as the Leica Deluxe 7 and 8. It's sexy, compact, tactile, has the retro vibe. It's a must-have in this collection. The Lumix LX100 II is a lightweight, compact camera with a powerful Micro Four Thirds sensor and many desirable features, and it's been my go-to camera for casual photographing ever since I bought it. In this video, I want to talk about the pros and cons of the camera based on my own experience. First of all, one of the biggest selling points of this camera is its physical build. A tiny, unassuming compact camera with Micro Four Thirds sensor inside at 392 grams. That weighs almost nothing compared to cameras with a similar caliber sensors. The size allows you to fit it inside your pocket comfortably when lens is collapsed. Yes, there are interchangeable cameras combos at a similar size, for example Lumix GX85 with Lumix 12-32mm f3.5 to 5.6 lens, also pocketable when lens is collapsed. However, you get a much better lens with the LX100 II being a Leica certified 24-75mm full-frame equivalent focal length with the variable maximum apertures from f1.7 to 2.8. If you put this side by side with the Panasonic 12-60 lens, this one is noticeably smaller and nimbler, yet the technical features are very close. At wide end, the lens offers a very bright max aperture f1.7. The sensor is only partially utilized in this camera. To maximize the resolution available, you need to shoot in 4:3 aspect ratio. That gets 17 megapixel image, which accounts for 85% of the entire 20 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor featured in this camera. So the shallow depth of field you can achieve with this lens is going to be just about the same level as Leica 12-60mm f2.8 to 4 lens. Some might be disappointed because f1.7 to 2.8 sound really awesome and raised their expectations a lot. But in my opinion, this really is some exceptional level of subject separation achieved in such a tiny camera lens. The bokeh created by this lens is pretty decent for such a tiny camera. Especially when shooting very close up, you can get quite nice subject separation. Can you shoot portrait with this lens? Well, you can expect as much bokeh as the Leica 12-60 f2.8 to 4, so no if you want professional headshot look. You need interchangeable camera and fast prime lens for that. But for me, this camera is only meant to shoot street landscape while I'm traveling light or going out snap some shots in discreet and casual manner. So completely different purpose than shooting portraiture. The camera body design is another big selling point, resembling classic rangefinder film cameras a lot from the top-down view. Thanks to the implementation of a full physical manual control dials on camera, you have shutter speed dial, exposure compensation dial on the body, and aperture ring on the lens. Literally no need to fumble in the menu to switch exposure mode. You have the maximum control of the camera straight from the physical body. For a lot of people, the tactile feel offers a way superior shooting experience. And on an aesthetic level, the design is just much more beautiful than most contemporary rangefinder style mirrorless cameras, with very few dials on top. This camera looks near identical to its sister camera Leica Deluxe 7. Most noticeable difference being the presence of the thumb and finger grip on the right side of the camera, which don't come with the Leica version. So this is a big win for the Lumix fans. We are basically paying less to get more. A unique toggle switch is on top of the lens which controls the aspect ratio of the image. You have 4 classic options. 3:2 gives you 16 megapixel resolution, 16:9 gives you 15 megapixel, and 1:1 gives you the least resolution, which is 12.5 megapixel. Might as well crop it in post if you want to shoot square images. And 4:3, as I mentioned before, gives you 17 megapixel resolution, slightly more than 3:2. Because the different aspect ratio settings utilize different crops of the sensor, you actually get horizontally the widest field of view out of all combinations with 16:9. Personally, I like to keep it on 4:3 most of the time, unless I really want to stretch the length of the image, then 16:9, or 3:2 if I'm on a different mood. It's all up to you. The image quality is pretty good. I never pixel peep when I shoot with this camera anyway. In my experience, as long as the aperture setting is appropriate for the occasion, you will get sharp image from corner to corner. I've never noticed any soft spot or weak performance from this lens. Shooting directly against the sun may get you some flares, but that's expected. A zoom rocker underneath the shutter button allows you to zoom in and out smoothly, especially helpful in video. Personally, I find the zoom speed way too slow. As a compact camera, I wish it had more speedy, nimble zooming, allowing fast image capturing on the street. Alternatively, you can use the zoom ring on the lens to zoom. You can choose to zoom smoothly like any other fly-by-wire zoom ring, or step zoom, which makes each turn of the ring go one step at a time among the following focal lengths: 24, 28, 35, 50, 70, 75. Again, if you want to go from 24 to 75, it will take more than a few seconds, which is one of the biggest drawbacks of this lens. Comparing to normal mechanical zoom lenses, you could go from 24 to 75 in one swift action in less than 1 second. The lens will protrude as soon as you turn on the camera. The length of the barrel sticking out increases steadily as you go from 24 to 75. On the side of the lens, there is a focus mode toggle switch. You can choose among autofocus, manual focus, and macro autofocus very quickly. Macro mode allows you to quickly find focus in close shooting situations. Yes, this camera focuses very close to the subject, like many other micro four thirds lenses do. Another big plus for this camera system. The viewfinder features the same old technology as GX85. If you are like me, you are going to see a lot of color tearing. It is not pleasant to use. Resolution is not great, so basically I disabled it and only use the back LCD display, which unfortunately doesn't tilt or articulate in any shape or form. It's just fixed on the back of the camera, making low-angle shots a little bit difficult. The display has full touchscreen functions, just like most Lumix cameras. Very intuitive to use, good sensitivity. I do find it annoying that sometimes I accidentally touch the screen and it will set autofocus point to that particular spot that I touched. To solve that, you can lock the control of the camera at one click of a button. And yes, the tiny camera body features quite a few fully customizable buttons, very impressive. Let's talk about the aperture and focal length. The physical specs of the lens is 10.9 to 34mm f1.7 to 2.8. Since the image out of the sensor is cropped in, the focal length translates to 12 to 37.4mm in micro four thirds terms, which is 24 to 75mm in full frame terms as mentioned before. Pretty standard zoom range. 24 is wide for most day-to-day shoot, and 75 is just a touch more generous than the classic 70mm. You probably wouldn't feel a difference though. The aperture decreases steadily as you zoom further in. It goes like this. At 24mm it is f1.7, 28mm f2.0, 30mm f2.1, 35mm f2.3, 50mm f2.7, 52 onward to 75mm it is f2.8. Burst mode is 11 frames per second max, but I only shoot low burst mode, basically single shot. Due to the type of shoot I use this camera for, I don't think anyone's getting this camera for sport. The old contrast-based autofocus technology from Lumix won't keep up anyway. Low light is meh. You might think that at f1.7 it should do pretty well, but from what I see, it doesn't differ much from other micro four thirds cameras with f2.8 to 4 lens on. Now about the video capabilities, it shoots up to 4K 30p in 100 megabits per second and 1080p 60p in just 28 megabits per second in MP4 format. Nothing impressive. The 4K will crop in a little. At its widest focal length of 24mm full frame equivalence, it will become 30mm after the crop. And at the longest end, instead of 75mm, it will become 94mm in 4K. The 4K image quality is pretty decent. 1080p doesn't crop, but image quality is not as great as GH5, G9 or GH6, these high-end cameras, but certainly enough for casual vlogging. While the smooth zoom by the zoom rocker is a nice touch, a big drawback for video is its lack of a sensor stabilization. The lens offers optical stabilization, however, the effect is rather underwhelming. Actually, I don't think the stabilization is even activated during video. All video shots by this camera is very shaky, even if you stay completely stationary. There is no mic input or headphone output. Onboard mic is borderline terrible, just like the GX85. No flippy screen, no CND or vlog profiles, all makes this camera very video unfriendly. But I don't think anyone is going to purchase this camera for its video capability ever. What it has, 4K 30p and 1080p 60p are just the bare minimum in today's age of mirrorless camera technology. Overall, underwhelming but understandable as it is made for photographers. Another big problem with this camera is its poor weather sealing, poor dust-proof capability. I bought it secondhand and it came with a big chunk of dust on the sensor, which is impossible to clean. I tried to shake it, knock it, and vibrate it. The dust wouldn't budge. When I step down the aperture, the dust is very much visible on the top right of the image, very distracting if the background is clean. So some healing in post is a must. Luckily, it's pretty quick in Lightroom. Press H and click over the black dot and it's fixed in a second. Yes, it's a bit annoying having to fix it for almost every single picture I take, but I saved a couple $100 buying a used camera, so fair. So far, I haven't introduced any new dust inside the lens or on the sensor, so at least there's that. Battery life is okay. Same battery as GX85 type of cameras. What I wish it had, or what the next iteration of this series should have, is better EVF, tilt screen, sensor stabilization, faster zoom mechanism, higher resolution sensor. This would definitely make a killer camera, but it would be bulkier if implemented. Honestly, I don't think this would be possible. I'm not even sure if they're going to make another one of these point-and-shoot compact photography camera anymore. Anyway, to conclude today's review, I'd say this is a pretty good purchase on second-hand market for photography purchase only. The Leica Deluxe7 is a near identical camera, both inside and outside, costs quite a lot more money than this LX100. So if you are interested in a budget Leica, this is it. A beautifully designed, retro-looking compact camera that gives you full control during photographing experience, offers great image quality and lens specs in a tiny package. All the drawbacks and compromises on this camera I mentioned before are worth considering, but I think the benefit outweighs the negatives significantly. To simplify it, is a camera that looks gorgeous, feels amazing to shoot, and the pictures come out of it are beautiful too. Thanks for watching. That's it for this compilation, and thank you for watching. See you next time.